Long ago, in the green valleys of Obudu, a small village surrounded by thick forests and rolling hills, life was simple, yet full of meaning. The people of Obudu woke each morning to the sound of roosters crowing, women pounding yam in wooden mortar, and children chasing each other across dusty paths. The air was always filled with music, sometimes from the birds that perched on the tall palm trees, sometimes from the river that rushed over smooth stones, and sometimes from the steady beat of the village drum. That drum belonged to Akpala, the oldest drummer in Obudu. His back was bent with age. His hair was as white as the cotton fields, but his hands still carried the strength of a lion, and whenever they touched his drum, Akpala's drum was no ordinary drum. The villagers believed it was carved long ago by his ancestors, from the sacred Iroko tree deep within the forest. Its skin was stretched with animal hide that had been blessed under the full moon. When Akpala played it, the whole village listened, for his rhythm spoke louder than words. At weddings, his drum announced joy. At funerals, it wept with sorrow. At harvest festivals, it filled the air with dance. And even the unborn children in their mother's womb stirred to its sound. But as the years passed, the world began to change. Young men in the village began to craft new drums, brighter and louder, decorated with colorful beads and shiny cowries. Their rhythms were fast, wild, and exciting. The people, especially the youth, were drawn to this new sound. Papa Akpala's drum is too slow, they would whisper. It belongs to the past. At festivals, the chief began to invite the younger drummers instead. The children no longer ran to Akpala's hut in the evenings to hear him play. His drum sat in the corner of his small hut, gathering dust. One night, as the moon shone over Obudu, Akpala sat alone beside a small fire. His wrinkled hands rested on his knees, and his drum lay beside him, silent. He looked at it with tears in his eyes. "Have they truly forgotten me?" he whispered. "Have they forgotten the drum that once carried this village?" He sighed deeply, his chest heavy. "Perhaps my time has ended." But the gods had other plans. That very night, something unusual happened in Obudu. A silence like no other fell upon the land. The crickets that normally sang in the grass stopped. The wind that usually whispered through the trees became still. Even the river, which never ceased its murmuring, seemed to hold its breath. Then, a loud, desperate cry echoed through the village. "Help! Help! The prince is missing!" It was the voice of the chief's guard. Panic spread like wildfire. The chief's only son, little Ekin, had wandered into the forest while playing with other children, and he had not returned. The villagers grabbed torches and ran into the forest, calling his name. "Ekin, little prince, where are you?" The forest, however, swallowed their voices. The deeper they went, the darker it seemed to grow. The tall trees stood like silent giants, their shadows twisting like spirits in the night. The villagers searched, but the boy did not answer. Mothers wept, fathers shouted. The chief himself, though a proud man, fell to his knees in despair. As the search grew hopeless, the villagers returned to the village square. Some shook their heads. "The forest has taken him. No child survives a night in the forest of spirits." But then, slowly, an old man rose from the crowd. His steps were weak, but his presence commanded silence. It was Akpala. In his hands, he carried his drum. The villagers looked at him with doubt. Some even scoffed. "What can this old man do? His drum is of no use here." But Akpala said nothing. He sat on a low stool, placed the drum between his knees, and closed his eyes. Then, with steady hands, he began to play. Dum, dum, dum. The sound was soft at first, like a whisper. Then it grew stronger, a rhythm that spoke of comfort, of home, of safety. The villagers froze. They remembered that sound. It was the rhythm that once guided their festivals, the rhythm that every child of Obudu knew from birth. Deep in the forest, little Ekin sat shivering under a tree, frightened by the night. But then, he heard it. Dum, dum, dum. His eyes widened. His fear lessened. "That is Akpala's drum," he whispered. "That sound will take me home." He rose to his feet, following the beat. Step by step, the drum led him out of the shadows, and just as the villagers lost hope, a small figure emerged from the darkness. Ekin, running into his father's arms. The crowd erupted in joy. Mothers ululated. Fathers raised their torches to the sky. Tears streamed down the chief's face. And at the center of it all sat Akpala, his drums still beating, his eyes shining with quiet pride. From that day, everything changed. The villagers no longer ignored the old drummer. They understood that while the new drums were exciting, the old drum carried the soul of their people. The chief himself bowed before Akpala and declared, "A village that forgets its roots will lose its way. Obudu will never again forget the wisdom of its elders." And so, Akpala's drum continued to echo through the land, teaching both young and old the value of remembrance, respect, and tradition. Sometimes, in life, we forget the value of the old our traditions, our elders, and even the lessons of our past. But when darkness comes, it is those old truths that guide us home. Never despise the things that once gave you light.